Hello, it's Matterall, and today on EVE Online, we're going to explore the stories for December 2nd, 2019. We're closing into the end of a decade. I just thought about it, and so we could really spend the last month here in December talking about what's happened in the last 10 years as much as we can talking about the last year. Hanging out with me today is McLeod. What's up, McLeod?
Hey.
We're going to go over some of the stuff that's happened over the last few days because we've been gone for 3 or 4 days, basically, for Thanksgiving. That's the American holiday. That is completely not what you think it is, by the way. I think it was a bunch of drunk pilgrims shooting their guns off in some kind of celebration, and then the allied Native Americans showed up with a bunch of troops to see, like, what's going on here? Do we need to help defend our friends? And then later it got all mixed up into this um, this whole I guess you would call a propaganda campaign of the rugged individualism of pilgrims and that kind of stuff, and the friends. And it's really weird if you dig into Thanksgiving. It's totally not what we celebrate now. Okay, but that was Thanksgiving, American style. Now we're gonna do some EVE Online stuff. Let's see. Wow, has a lot of have a lot of things. No, how would you say this? A lot has happened, right? Hyperlink relays come out. So we talked a bit about that. We'll talk more about it today. Yesterday, in the middle of our show, we had a huge dread bomb take out 60 Rorquals that belonged to the Imperium. You're wondering, how do 60 Rorquals all use the same system? Well, it's called a Locust fleet. And just like a locust, they come into a certain crop field and just disintegrate the place, eating everything up. So that's why they called it that. And what that is, technically inside the game, is this group Imperium has a big industrial and mining base, descends on moon mining once a month or once every 2 weeks. I think they rotate around and they come in and they just, as one big group that's supposed to be very secure, just devour all the moon minerals that they can as fast as they can. And all their moons are timed for this fleet, so it's very rhythmic and very easy to predict, and that's why security is so high. But somehow, we're not quite sure, Dreadbomb was able to get on grid with them and destroy, oh,
Um,
50, 60 of them before the Dread Bomb could be countered completely
well, I,
by
I can
Titans.
speak to that a little bit if you
Okay.
want. So, one of the things about a Locust fleet is essentially the reason why people do it is, you have a bunch of moons that come out with very valuable materials in them, and you do want to capitalize on them, but you can't have you know your your super fleet like standing by for endless amounts of times while people just casually go and do it. So you set an op to actually do it, to blitz it essentially. You know, so you can have your full strength super fleet there ready to go if in case the situation goes awry, which unfortunately it did this time. But there was mitigating circumstances as to why the butcher bill was so large in comparison to normally how people sort of think something like this would go down. But essentially, yeah, you want to blitz those money moons essentially.
What were the mitigating circumstances, or in this case, the augmenting circumstances for the destruction of?
So yeah, so for the most part, when you're moving like a locust fleet around, essentially, you want to be moving from Sino to Sino, um, or basically, providing warp ins that are free and clear of bubbles and that kind of thing. Um, when you're moving from Sino to Sino, you basically want to be jumping from Citadel to Citadel. so that you essentially get the the added advantage of tether. And when you're not, because basically if you're not on a citadel and you're not like within 200k of an asteroid, you essentially don't you essentially don't have you're not afforded the level of protection that is generally accepted when you're in a raw call. Essentially, what that means is like you don't have panic. You don't have the ability to panic for 5 minutes and be invulnerable for 5 minutes, because a panic module requires you to have an active lock, to a an asteroid. And if you don't have that lock, the panic doesn't function. So what happened with with Imperium's kind of Locust fleet at that particular point was two spies, I believe, two spy alts, basically burnt their characters by providing uh, sinos essentially in the system that the Locust fleet was going to be going to next. And so they jumped. So essentially, all the Rorquals jumped to those sinos rather than to the sinos that were going to be set up for the Locust fleet to actually come into. Like normally onto an Astra house, but they were off an Astra house somewhere. I don't know. They were somewhere basically where you couldn't get tether and you weren't able to lock onto any kind of asteroid in order to use your panic. So they didn't have panic. They didn't have tether. They're basically sitting there with low HP, because they're not like they're not like supers and titans that have like huge HP buffers. They have okay HP buffers, but like they're not set up to be high in HP. So what happens there was essentially all the raw calls come in. One of the raw call, either one of the raw calls or a an additional sort of pilot lit a sino for the hostiles that basically dropped a dread bomb. Uh, while they were dropping bubbles to make sure that all of the raw calls couldn't get out, and then they just proceeded to basically just fire straight through them.
Yeah. Uh, so Bigga tells me here the attacking FC had blue alts in goons and X'd up for Sino of the response fleet, and then wasted one Sino to a random place off grid, giving them more time to attack. So they diverted the defense fleet, it sounds like.
Yeah. Okay, that would also help as well because in those situations, generally you tend to have a super fleet ready to go, and you also tend to have faxes ready to go. So I imagine the faxes came in on that fake sino that was a way off, and so that further basically you know um, exacerbated the situation for the Imperium's Lucas fleet.
Yeah.
Because normally you think normally when it comes to when it comes to attacking raw calls, you kind of think like there's some time, you have some time in a raw call to get your response fleet in, right? But that is only in the situation where you can panic. So when you don't have
Mhm.
that panic module, it's everything's flipped on its head.
Well, yeah, that's one of the primary defenses of those ships is they can delay an attack. And if you have multiples, they can all help delay each other's attacks, right? I imagine you can turn on one Rorqual's defensive stasis mode where it has 6 or 7 minutes, used to be 7, I think it's 6, of invulnerability. And then uh, the next one can light up. They can actually,
Well,
can they make each other invulnerable? I don't know if they can. I think it has to be
No,
yeah,
they'll make subcaps invulnerable, like
the mining
within a
ships.
certain range of them, but
Yeah,
like the mining barges and that kind of thing. But
yeah.
like they won't add additional protection to other raw calls.
Right.
Like
So they
it's
can't do that for each other.
yeah, that's true.
Well, interesting. So I don't know, how were they caught off guard though? Why weren't they near Why weren't they near some kind of a tether or mining?
Well,
Sorry, asteroid.
normally they'd jump to a sino that's lit, that's in range of tether. Essentially, that's that tends to be how you operate a fleet like that, going from system to system. But in this instance, a blue alt or a blue alt of the hostile FC or of a member of the hostile fleet, that was in the uh, that was in the Locust fleet as a spy alt,
Mm,
xed up and lit a sino for the system that they're going into. That was in a very precarious place. That didn't provide them the protection or afford them the protection that they wanted.
yeah.
So they were baited on a sino essentially.
Well, interesting. So now that we know what happened, who did it?
It was a conglomerate of you know um, Imperium hating groups, or non-Imperium aligned groups, put it that way. Also including sort of the usual uh, Fountain Core kind of groups as well. That maybe not aren't specifically anti-Imperium, but they're just anti whoever is occupying the space.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. You said you said Fountain Core because this really happened near their normal region. This happened in Fountain, first of all, Fountain region, and this was TEG TAC SD, which is actually within
It's
jump
a
range.
southern area of Fountain, yeah.
Yeah, let's look at it on the map here. Um, Best way probably is dotland for this one.
You generally tend to sort of look at Fountain in terms of like northern Fountain and southern Fountain. There's generally a large or a lengthy jump between. Oh God, what is it? This is gonna people who know me are gonna be like, how do you not know this gate? KVN and CTACN. Sorry,
Yeah.
which on a regular map on Fountain, it doesn't look you know particularly noteworthy, but when you actually look at it at you know an actual map of the systems, uh, relative to where they are in space, it's a massive jump.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so uh, Cricket Gaming there says we had a few systems ready, but TEG was the main one, so we got lucky with that. Um, I suppose he means the this could have gone off in a few different systems, but the best one that the Dread Bomb was prepared for was TEG, and so they were lucky that it happened there. I think. I don't know. But here's the system here on the map. As you can see, it's Western Fountain, which is a Western region to begin with. And this is really three jumps, really, from Serpentis space. And Serpentis is unconquerable space, which means that the stations that are there, and there are 5 stations in that constellation, can host anybody. Nobody can lock them. Nobody can lock those stations, so anyone can dock there, provided you can get there. Which means the fountain will always have a point of resistance and never be completely conquerable because you have stations there that can host ambushing or skirmishing or um, people who are disrupting fountains can always park in Serpentis space, and that's probably where this dread bomb came out of. And it's definitely right there within range of TEG. So, but that's an assumption. I think the interesting part of this is the guy that is taking a lot of credit for it and may have been instrumental, probably was, is Pittsburgh. I think it's 2989, and he recently left the Imperium, so he was probably someone that knew how these things worked very well, and probably played a major role in orchestrating this.
I would be I would be surprised if he didn't have any kind of role in this. I'm fairly certain he did. a pivotal role, I think, probably.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing is, you know, the information that he has, leaving sort of the Imperium, degrades and reduces in value in time. So,
So
him
this had to
striking,
happen quickly.
yeah, him striking while the iron is hot is, was, definitely added to the capacity of, these groups being able to deal damage.
So that's FC Pittsburgh. Other people that might have been involved were Olmeca Gold, who talked with us yesterday on live stream, and so he talked about it. And interestingly enough, Ron from Tests had a show with whale hunters, and whale hunters are people who specialize in killing expensive ships. It's like singular point of attack, expensive ships, and like the big whale hunters are the ones that are attacking alliance tournament ships that are worth hundreds of billions in ISK and successfully baiting and ambushing those. But a whaler can also be somebody who specializes in killing capital industrial ships like a Rorqual or menacing them in some way, taking their drones that do the mining, in any way affecting these singular ships. The Locust fleet is interesting because it's one of the few fleets that is massive with these basic giant whale ships that are worth a lot. They're worth about 8 to 10 billion the way they're fitted and everything. So that's an expensive loss. And so when you put 50, 60 of those together, it's basically like a whale herd. So there was a show on whalers and what their techniques are, and then we had an interview with Pittsburgh a few days later, and how he was very, very upset at Matani and the Goon Swarm and the Imperium, and said he would never come back as long as Matani was leader because he just had disagreements with him. And so he went and left the Imperium. So those two guys meet each other. I think Ron says maybe these guys should talk because they both said we want to attack, or we should attack these Locust fleets. And in doing so, they got to talking, and I guess something came out of it because clearly something big happened a few days later after that. So all that was put together by the parties that came through TIS. And that doesn't mean that we're endorsing that sort of thing, but it was just like a confluence of 3 or 4 different groups of people that could help each other out. And then Kapawi, an entire Locust fleet gets. I don't think the entire fleet was killed, but like I think a big portion of it was. That's not, it's not nothing because there's a ton of money, right? It was 400 to 450, maybe 500 billion ISK that was lost.
Yep.
But it's also not entirely unreplaceable, especially when you have such strong mining operations and such strong mining reserves and stuff like that. So, yeah. See, it was 1/3 the total Rorks that were out there. So that must mean there's over 100 Rorquals out there, which is astounding.
Yeah, the Locust fleets are generally pretty sizable. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons why they call it Locust fleets, right? Is because it's a massive amount of locusts coming in. Like locusts are tend to be considered like swarm like, but not just from a goon swarm kind of perspective, but just from a sheer numbers kind of amount.
Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that TEG was an optimal system to hit the Locust fleet in for the people that were ambushing. And the reason for that is they had Sinos and Sabers logged off in the system, and they probably had the most amount of those there. So that was why the ambush was set up in that system. And luckily, the Locust fleet came through there and triggered the the ambush. So, wow, that was a massive hit. That's the biggest hit Imperium has taken in a while.
It is. But I know that some of the people who lost, lost Rorquals there would probably not think that it's good for the game that this has happened. But like to some degree, I do kind of feel like it was an important thing to have happened, like a good thing to happen in the game,
Mm-hmm.
because there was a lot of murmuring, a lot of kind of like just sort of back channel kind of talk and stuff like that about Locust fleets and similar things basically being nigh invulnerable, right? And
Well,
to some degree, there was some hubris there as well that
sure. Wasn't
tended to
somebody
go with
saying
that.
that? Like that's part of the
There,
joke.
yeah, there was some conversation, some quote that was made in the fleet like an hour before this sort of all went down as to that there hadn't actually ever been a Rorqual that had died in a Locust fleet, which it's always funny. It's always funny that those sorts of things preclude a really really
Yeah.
bad thing from happening, right? It's just like spoke too soon.
Never say that out loud. Whew, we made it.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Avalanche. Yeah. So Irani hack song. I don't know. Iranal hack song. Got it. Got it. Nailed it. Nailed it. Says
First time.
Rourke's says 2 billion per Rorqual. That's not a lot of ISK, but as you can see right here, this one was worth 9.5. This one was worth 9.8, 9.1. This one's 9.1. This one's 8.9. This one's 8.9. Of course, that's the first few, but maybe if we go down a few, let's see.
Yeah, there were definitely a few that were very pimped out, but like a lot. The loss of the Rorquals themselves are not going to be like massive in any way, shape, or form. It's the loss of all the really important kind of modules and the excavators and stuff inside of those
Yeah.
that's going to hurt people.
And as we continue down over the last 7 days, they're 8.3, 8.3, 8.3. So 8 to 9, I said 9 to 10 billion, but it's more like 8 to 10 billion per Rorqual. That's a lot for individuals. Could be a lot for individuals. It depends. If you're part of these things and you have been for a while, it's set you back quite a bit, but you can probably make that up. But there's definitely not 2 billion per Rorqual. So sorry, that's not true. What is true is it's more like 8 or 9 billion per Rorqual. They got attacked here. That's why the number goes up to like 425 billion.
If you're a prudent Rorqual pilot, you would be on to your backup Rorquals now.
Yeah.
It's kind of how it functions. But some people fly by the seat of their pants with with the liquid disk, and then just
Do you think
if they
there's
need it, buy a new one.
do you think there's any kind of psychological, oh, we're not as safe as we were kind of thing?
Oh, there's totally it's there, there's totally there's a very psychological element to this because it's and any situation like this tends to be the blood in the water that tends to make people kind of sit up and react and kind of go, oh, it is possible,
Mm-hmm.
or oh, it is kind of something that we thought was not possible is now possible. Like you
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, it may require a little bit more work than just roaming around
Yeah.
in cruises kind of thing. But that's the thing, if you roam around in a bunch of cruises, you're only really going to get, the amount of content that you've kind of put the effort in for, right? Um, Pittsburgh and all the associated guys who worked, hard in order to actually pull this off, put a lot of time, put a lot of effort, put a lot of, resources into doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and they all have to kind of come together and not kind of there's a good mixture of invested time, invested effort, and there's also a fair amount of luck that also has to go that way as well.
Yeah. Well, as we're seeing here, there was 153, 152, 153 Rorquals total in that fleet. That's a big, big fleet of Rorquals. So having a third of them get wiped out is a big bite, but that just means 2/3 are there. And also there were, um, by the way, that 152 I think was something Pando wrote here. But then Arcanor 1981 says he heard there were 153 Rorquals on contract and Delve already replaced, he says. So we'll see. I mean, clearly, if anyone can recover from this, it's the Imperium. They've been at it a while, and they've built up reserves, and there's a lot of mineral reserves there. In fact, this will probably bolster their price per mineral unit because a lot will be used to replace some of the stuff. I think what you have to look at is individually how this affects individuals, because I don't think they have. Maybe they have ship replacement for this on a state level, so they don't. So that each individual Rorqual pilot doesn't get sidelined. But there's a few things at work here. One is like, do they want to continue doing it? Two is how much they actually lose. Three is how much do they get replaced as an individual. So there's a lot of motivating factors. Okay, that is. So we got the who, the what, the when. This happened 2 days ago. You can see here, December 1st. I guess it was just yesterday. So December 1st in TEG TAC SD will be known as the at what time? At 1800, pretty much 1847, will be known as a big battle against mining, where lots of mining ships were destroyed, a huge amount of mining value.
Do you have a particular anti bug spray over there in the US? Like,
You mean for locusts?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they handle locusts. I think it's a global problem, but if it happens in the United States, it's in the middle of America, not on the West Coast. I don't think we have locusts out here. We don't have many bugs that'll kill you. Just a couple. Is there anything
The,
else here?
the,
Why he
the,
did
the,
it? Why they did it? I think was revenge and opportunity. Uh,
it was definitely a revenge and opportunity.
yeah.
Like, definitely opportunity for sure. Like
Hmm.
the TEG napalm moment.
Let's look at the revenge aspect of this, because Pittsburgh is really, here it is. Pittsburgh sends his regards, which is making fun of Matani, who sends his regards because of the Spymaster game years ago. If we click into there, I think it's just a little animation. Yeah, it's just an animation. Not animation, it's a little image. Um, and then he writes 6 years wasted. uh, yeah, he's upset because he spent a lot of time in Goon Swarm, and then now he feels like that was wasted. So 6 years. Well, Pittsburgh, man, undeniable big hit to the Imperium. Whether they can replace it or not, it's on their record as a massacre, and FC Pittsburgh pretty much engineered that. It looks like.
He may have given Goonsholm something to think about. You never know. But then again, there's to
Yeah.
some degree higher levels will probably look at this and be like, oh, it's only 60, 60 something Rorquals.
Well, that'll be their public stance anyway. Whether they're actually mad behind the scenes, who knows? But publicly, they'll be like, meh, replaced
Eh,
already.
already replaced.
Yeah, you just made us sell more minerals. Thank you. All of it SRP, et cetera, et cetera. All the stuff that immunizes you against humiliation, all that stuff will come out. But who knows what the reality is if people are actually upset. People are probably examining it, saying, how could this happen? How did it happen? Could it happen again? How do we insulate ourselves? Damage control for the next time.
Well, it definitely can happen again. Like, there hasn't been any kind of seismic sudden shifts or changes in the game from CCP to make it not like capable of happening again. So
Mm-hmm.
it's entirely capable of happening again.
Yeah. All right, we'll circle back to some of this stuff Yeah. INN Quantums or NN Quantum says did not want those rorquals anyway. That is another usual uh, something that's said. And you know what's weird is sometimes there's actually truth to that because there are a lot of fleets where doctrines will shift. So an alliance has like a certain menu that the FCs will pull from. So they'll say, okay, we need to do this kind of work. Well, this and this kind of ship works for that. So let's get 2 fleets of those and we'll go. And they go and do this kind of work. Or an enemy will be coming at them and the spies will say, yeah, they're coming at us in Feroxes, for instance, like or a cruiser fleet. And so people will say like, well, what's our hard counter to a cruiser fleet? Well, let's get into those T3 ships, for instance, and get out there and eat up that or destroy that cruiser fleet that's headed at us. So every alliance will have a list of doctrines that they use, certain ships in coordination with one another. So what happens is because the game evolves, the doctrines have to evolve too to figure out what the best counter is after things change. And you end up having a lot of leftover stuff that won't sell as well because it's not really in use. So a lot of times FCs will be thinking, well, I just want to do something. So let's grab these ships that are no longer on our menu and fly them out there and get them destroyed and kill as many things as possible while we do it. So you go out there to burn the ships to get the insurance money back, but also to have some fun. So a lot of times, if an FC says, yeah, we didn't want those ships anyway, there's actually some truth behind it. They're just trying to get rid of them. Okay. Changing gears to, wow, there's so much to cover. And I have a feeling December won't be quiet. I think that a lot of things are coming up here, but let's just do some of this other busy work here. Like NER is back with their 1900 report. Should check that out. Agamemnon, or yeah, the editor there. I think that's his name. Nice guy. Talked to him at eVegas for a while. We had a nice long conversation about media and history and that kind of stuff. So in that last 1900 report, he does say they will be a lot more regular than they were now that his situation is stabilized. So he'll start writing a bit more. But on that one particularly, you saw the next chapter in the invasion expansion is released, and he's talking about the. Actually, let's go to NER and check that out instead of just looking at my notes. NER New Eden report. Boop.
Yeah, I like New Eden Report. Yeah, they're good. They're good
They
guys.
they treat Eve as with the seriousness that it deserves as news.
And they try and be as
Straightforward.
stating straightforward and just stating facts rather than actually putting colorful or sort of
Mm-hmm.
politically charged sort of language into it. So that's nice.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I did appreciate. Where is it here? I thought I had it up. Let's go to INN first. We'll come back to INN Imperium News. Imperium.news. This is an organization I had a lot to do with a few years back. And I think Mist Warden here did a good job of writing up the Dread Bomb. He had access to it from Goon Swarms because obviously this is the people who lost all those Rorquals. This is their website for news. So you're going to get really good information on what they're thinking about things. And here you'll see Jay, the FC, the Defense Fleet's FCs talk about his perspective on it. But I thought it was a pretty good write-up. Speaking with Pittsburgh, 2989, FC for Trigger Happy, he told me that they used bait Sino within the Locust fleet. So anyway, it's a nice breakdown because they have access to pretty much all the people involved. It's kind of a short write-up, but there it is. And sometimes you don't get that on INN. Sometimes you get people who, the way the news sites work is writers will write about what they want to write, and very rarely will you get material turned down. So if if you want to write something that is going to appeal to an Imperium audience, you would want to put it in front of them on INN. And so it seems like a lot of the stuff that comes out of INN is going to be built for the INN audience, which is basically INN.
Um, Actually, kind of one of the funny things about uh, about the goings on in talking stations, like I think it was the Saturday, like literally the day before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little bit of a conversation going on in talking stations regarding, Titan usage and the fact that like, a lot of people were feeling, or people had been starting to feel a little bit um, left to not experience the content that they were hoping to get. When they're basically being requested to get into Titans as fast as possible. I would say that, even though this situation in Teg kind of you know had the Imperium lose 60 something raw calls, it did actually mean that a whole bunch of Titans got a whole bunch of content, as well. So,
They got to play.
if you had built Titans and you were prudently kind of, being in fleet, being in the sort of the fleets to defend those things, you would have got content from it. So it's all good.
Sure. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. All right, so 1900 report hits on the next chapter of Eve Invasion, which is Invasion 2, which is what CCP has released this winter. It's the second part of the invasion. They've done this before, actually. I think it was with, was it Trinity? Maybe not. But they've had an expansion that actually had a part 2 to it. It was early on. I'll look it up in a second. They also talk about Titan destroyed in Esoteria, not a big deal, and a statement from NER. Also 133 battle in Martok. I think that was a high sec battle. We talked about that a few days ago. Let me check where that is. And that was interesting. It's one of the, Black Rise. That's one of Faction War's biggest fights, Marto. So always little stuff happening there, but that was a big fight. 133 billion in that fight. But that was, so that's NER, the 1900 report. It's back. Good. Be good to read from there. Okay. What else? We did another thing that we did yesterday. We had a special show. It was 2 hours on purpose and started on time and ended on time. And what do we have on that, McLeod? You're the chief engineer
Oh,
for TIS.
yes. And when I'm doing those shows, generally I'm on a sort of a weird autopilot that basically makes me kind of forget what the hell happened on the show, even though it was 2 hours. But I know we had Andrew Groen on, so
Yes. I could
because
take it if you want.
I'm very much a fan of Andrew Groen. No, no,
No.
I remember that Andrew was on. And if Andrew's on, there's really only one conversation piece that Andrew was, that we were going to be speaking about, which would be the Empires of Eve Volume 2 that he's working on at the moment, that I've actually put in for top tier on
Oh, top tier.
Kickstarter for. Oh yeah, very much of a fan. Very much a fan.
That's great. I think I did too.
I missed out on the first book, so I'm making up.
Yeah, and here it is. There's Andrew Groen, and I'll have to run it because. And it was great. I think, and I said this on the show, as soon as he started talking, I just like, yeah, of course. Of course, I want to listen to this. There was just no. The way he approaches the material is so deep. It's way deeper than a video game. And I love that he takes that kind of reverence to it.
He also seems to talk and like piece it together and like not just from what he's actually put in the books, but like when he speaks about the book as well, like, and about like all the work that he's put in, like he speaks about Eve and about what we do and about the stories that happened, like with so much like respect. like more so than I think a lot of people who play Eve would would expect from anybody.
Mhm.
So, which is nice, which is like it's kind of really nice, almost like humbling.
Yeah. And while we were on, we raised a few $100 to add on to this long charity that was going on. So we took it almost to 8,000 and dollars total. Um, and I think they probably made $8,000 on this thing, so that's great.
Oh, they I think they hit, but by the very end of it, they topped over 10,000.
Over $10,000, so that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Always like that about the Eve community, the amount of giving that happens. There used to be is Plex for Good, something that CCP
I
used to
love Flex for
sponsor.
Good.
Yeah, it's good
It
stuff
was
when there's
10.5 from it
hi
was
Killah.
10.5 from the from the donations and 1.5 from the silent auction. So it was
Oh,
12K
nice.
total at the end of it, roughly.
That's great.
That's amazing.
Um, Killah B, I'm glad you're here. You were on this show as well. After we had Andrew Groen
Yeah.
on, we went ahead and went and asked you a bunch of questions about current stuff, and you're like, don't know. But the reason I brought you on was because you and I were talking before that, and you were going through memory lane about I Want ISK. So what do you remember when you go back to World War B or the Casino War? Like, what were some of the things that you were looking at that took you down memory lane?
A lot of the propaganda videos. Like the week between or the 2 weeks between. I actually can't remember. I think it was exactly 1 week between the 2DW timer and the MTKO timer. And that week was crazy because obviously I didn't have a job or anything. I didn't really go to university. I only did Eve, and all I did was spending it on Eve. And the propaganda, like there was literally 100 good Reddit posts, funny Reddit posts, meme Reddit posts about the current affairs, like every day, right? Like every morning I would wake up and just browse Reddit for 2 hours and see all the good propaganda that was made. Obviously there was a lot of trash one too, but
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of good one too. It was because the kind of the entire universe realized in 2DW that was the first fight that the CFC had been outnumbered in
Yeah.
for like a long time. And it was a huge moral boost where before 2DW, the entire peer leadership, high command at the time, doubted my campaign, doubted my involvement in World War B. They were like, oh, this is just going to be another failed goon killing attempt or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then after 2DW, everybody resubbed, like all the old school PL, like basically just the old school PL people that did actually still play. They went to all their old friends from back in the day, from like 2009 PL and so on, and they were like, "We're actually outnumbering goons. This time is actually happening. This time we're actually gonna kick them out or whatever, right?" And suddenly you saw like all these really old school PL people come back. You had Manny come back, though I don't really like him, but that's a different story.
But he came back.
Manny, you had like people like Nick Fuzzy come back, and some of the really cool people. And they sticked around for only that 1 week, right? Because then in MTech was obviously a huge fight with like 6,000 people, shitloads of tie dye, and after that they all basically just disappeared again because they realized how annoying the game can be to play on this kind of scale. But that week was just crazy. Everybody coming back, everybody, all the coordination happening. Then obviously we had the back channeling with CO2. We knew that they were gonna flip if they
Ah,
wouldn't, like,
okay. That,
even if they did manage to defend the iHub, CO2 still would have flipped, right? But
mm.
obviously with them losing the iHub, they had a nice excuse to go, hey, we didn't get proper support from goons. Now we lost our staging iHub, so we don't feel like we belong in this coalition anymore.
They were already on their way out, right?
Yeah. So I got approached by the judge who was their deploy at the time and GigX about 3 days or 4 days before the timer, the actual MTech all timer, and we started talking about them switching. I basically offered them, okay, look, you have two options. Either I went to them and said, well, they approached me, and then I said to them, you have two options. Either you stay with goons and we evict you, or you flip sides and you can fight alongside us. I did not accept because they wanted to stay neutral. They wanted to stay out of it and just stay in tribute, but stay out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't give them that option. I told them, no, that's not going to happen. Either you flip and you fight with us. That means you form fleets and you go to war with us, or you we kill everything you own in tribute because we cannot risk you going back to the goon site after the fact, and then they have a stronghold in tribute or something like that, you know.
Dang.
So we basically told them, either you are with us or you get pushed out completely, and they decided to go with us, so that worked out.
Oh, interesting. When I talked to GigX about it in retrospect, he said there was a corporation. He made up something about a corporation that, I don't know if it was made up. It was probably an additional reason. A corporation that was part of CO2 that actually was no longer part of CO2, and they had taken some stuff from CO2, so they were drawn into the battle for that reason, that CO2 actually didn't want to fight, and the World War B, we'll call it. But I'm sure there was many
I don't know what
reasons.
happened internally in CO2 at the time, obviously. Yeah, I
But
can't
you
really say.
basically said you're with us or against us.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did the Anakin, basically.
Yeah.
I did the Sith move. I
This is-
talked in absolutes. I only deal in absolutes at the time.
So you were a big ingredient to that war happening, because it would not have happened with all the things that came together. And you leading the PL campaign is one of them, and they were reluctant, right?
Well, I mean, I don't blame them. There was just those people that, there has been many attempts to kill the CFC before World War B happened, and every single one has failed because they were poorly organized.
Mhm.
And obviously, I was pretty new in PL at the time. I joined in mid 2015, but then I was inactive for a couple of months, and I returned in August, September 2015 to PL to actually start FCing when they recruited me out of Nully. And obviously I was the new guy, and it's like, basically for the old guard in PL, it was like, just another new FC who wants to prove it to us, and he's doing it with this completely blown out of proportion campaign that is to kill the goons, haha. So I don't blame them. I like, if some young FC in NC Dot would approach me with an idea like this right now, I would have the exact same reaction, right? I would laugh at him too.
Mhm.
So I don't blame them for that. But like I said, it took me a while to convince them, and before that, I didn't really have the full support of the leadership. Obviously, Elise was always with me because Elise is a nice guy, but Grath, for example, wasn't really convinced. Took him a while, but then after 2DW, he actually I probably still have that convo somewhere if he didn't delete it in Discord, because I'm pretty sure that was already in Discord. World War B started on Skype,
Yeah.
and then Discord came out, right? So I'm not sure if that conversation happened on Skype or on Discord, but
That was
basically he'd say,
that was actually one of the key ingredients, that you were able to coordinate multiple alliances easily through Discord, and that was what made things happen as quickly as it did.
yeah, it made it a lot easier. Like, obviously, a lot of the coordination happened on Skype before that, and it was fine. Or you had to set up some infrastructure with Jabber, but having Discord was making it a lot easier. But yeah, basically, Graf told me after 2DW, it was like, holy shit, you might actually be able to do it or something. That's what he just wrote me. And then I was like, okay, so now he's on board.
He's a
And
believer.
then everybody got hyped. Yeah. That was great. It was good times. I remember that probably. After MTech everything after that was kind of tedious, but it had to be done. And obviously, I did try to convince the PL leadership to follow Goons down to Delft, but I do understand that it wasn't possible, in the sense that members were burnt out, and there was just no way that people were gonna, like, there would have been a revolt if the next post had been, okay, now we're gonna follow them to Delft and keep sitting on them, right? So yeah,
Well,
that didn't happen.
but why? Because people were tired? Because in
No,
retrospect,
there was just no content, right? Like, there was no real fights in World War B. There was like a couple couple fights at the start, and then it was just us sitting on top of goons trying to suppress them from taking back the space. And that didn't really result in any decent fights. There was a couple ones when we camped Saranen, when they were staging in Saranen. There were a couple spontaneous brawls that happened, and some of them went really good for us, some of them went really bad for us. And that was okay, but it was a really tedious campaign. It was really tedious. I was really happy that I managed to outsource most of the Inti fleets and stuff to test. Like, I just told ProGuard, hey, you guys deal with these fucking claw fleets or whatever, and then they did that. But
I think you attack test when they were on their way up to help, right?
no, that was one FC in PL, and I was really mad at him.
Oh,
and
okay,
then
it
I
wasn't you.
actually,
Yeah.
It was just one FC that did that. He
Thought that was pretty funny.
a little bit of a rogue FC. It was just run Mexico stuff as usual.
Oh,
But
okay. Well, that helps explain it.
yeah.
Yeah, so that, in retrospect, that was a big mistake not going down there and sitting on them, because it allowed them to
I'm not
get a
sure, to be
foothold.
honest. Like, we had strategically, yes, but we had a time of our lives. Like, we were the kings of the game. Like, PL and C were the kings of the game from after World War B up until basically 2018, right? When UALX X47 happened, we suppressed every single deployment GU tried, including the Hakonnen deployment. We suppressed their attempt to kill a 9-Tech-4 Keepstar, which was horribly out of place.
Mm.
We did so much shit, right? We evicted CO2 and Test from the north, pushed him south. All of that stuff happened, and that was an actual great campaign. Like, the whole NC and PL versus or Horde NC and PL versus CO2 and Test and Tribute. That was actually a decent war. There was a lot of good fights for both sides. And then when I was inactive at the start of it, and then I came back in the middle of the campaign. Basically, PL was still deployed to Wiener at the time, and it was only NC and Horde versus CO2 and Test. And NC and Horde didn't really do that well. They lacked proper coordination. They didn't really have a campaign commander. It was just kind of a wiggledy kind of effort. And then I kind of came back and I was like, well, this looks like a great content down there. Why are we sitting in Wiener with PL? Why don't we go down there? I basically convinced PL to deploy to Tribute as well. We did that, and then I kind of took over. Like, I know the EUTZ-PK, right? Like, not the US one, but the EUTZ-PK from NC Dot. He was the main FC in NC Dot at the time.
Yeah, Poison
And I
Kevin.
had actually had a conversation with him about that, because he was really mad at me at the time, because I just came back and I just took control, right? And obviously he was doing a lot of the fleet, so he kind of felt in charge. And I just came in and said, like, okay, well, this campaign, you guys are shit at organizing this campaign. I'm taking over. I'm organizing the campaign now. Like I said, I was a very different person back then. I just kind of came in, took over. And then, 3 weeks later, we killed the MTK Keepstar, that kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the biggest fights.
It was a bit more than that, but
well, it was one of the biggest fights in EVE history. Is the first Keepstar to go down that was actually defended to a certain degree. You guys mapped out some kind of crucifixion strategy where you came at it from like 4 different angles or something.
There was no way that thing was going to live. We outnumbered them. But like, the MTK Keepstar has 4,000 people shooting it on the kill mail, right? And that doesn't include XIX who just got dropped on the way. So they just got, there was no way that thing was going to live anyways.
I think ProGod and Test decided they weren't going to fight in the Keepstar fight, and they ambushed XIX.
And they dropped XIX on the way. That was a great, really, really good play by ProGod, because obviously there was no real fight for them in MO. There was only going to be a whelp. And dropping on XIX was a good call. Obviously, that was low sec wasn't reinforced, right? So they had terrible tie-dye in that system. And I told the XIX straight up, FC straight up, bro, we're not going to come there to support you, because MTech has 0 tie-dye, and your system is at like 1% tie-dye already. And if we jump in like another 2,000 people that dogpile on Test, then it's just gonna be shit, right? So we just stayed in MO. XIX and Test duked it out. XIX got shit on pretty bad, and Test had a good time dropping on him, I guess, and we killed the MTGO Keepstar. It was decent.
Yeah. So they.
That's also a good memory. Not the MO Keepstar, but the Nebula one was hilarious. The whole thing was hilarious.
That was the one that was destroyed.
It's not on Z-Kill, because for some reason the kill mail never loaded, because there was too many people on the kill.
Right. And that's where the was it Project Mayhem had put together a bunch of shuttles to create tie-dye.
Yeah, they just they randomly dropped that Keepstar. Nobody, at least on our end, nobody knew about it. Some random dude poked me on Discord and was like, I just flew through Nervula and spotted this Keepstar. And it was the first case by Keepstar ever, right? So it was a big deal. And I was like, holy shit, this is like indirect jump. This was in direct jump range, or 1 minute away from the entire NCPL super fleet. I was like, well, that thing's not gonna live. We're gonna kill it.
We didn't give that permission.
And I'm not very proud of what I did back then, because I bet phoned everybody, right? Like, I just called everybody, and I just wanted to make sure that thing dies, no matter who they call, who they ask for help. I wanted to make sure that thing dies. And it wasn't very hard getting people on board. Like, I just approached different FCs I knew from all over the place. Like, you want to be involved in the first case by Keepstar kill ever? Who was going to say no to that, right? Like, everybody just said yes immediately. So we had and it came out, and they placed it pretty well, because it was placed to anchor, on a Tuesday, so in the week at downtime, right? And obviously, I didn't expect a great turnout from anyone, but we had 2,700 people
Yeah, that
on
was
a
huge.
Tuesday at downtime. So
Well, I
I
think
was like, all right,
even Reddit was
Jesus.
leveraged. I remember it's like, come kill
yeah.
this
People
Keepstar.
came over from Jeddah. We basically told people, hey, you know, if you shoot the Keepstar, you can stay. And it was hilarious. After downtime, I logged in, like, I had everybody stay logged off after downtime, because my biggest fear was that it would anchor after downtime, because obviously the actual anchoring timer isn't affected by tie-dye.
Mhm.
So I was scared that if you log in too many people, the tie-dye is going to be too bad and we won't be able to apply DPS before the thing repairs. So I was like, I told 200, like 200, 700, 2,700 people basically stayed logged off because I told them to. I logged in with my main character. I was like, okay, grid's clear. And then all the random high-sec people that came from Jeddah, because it's really close, right? They all started decloaking and logging in. There was just this ton of frigates and bombers and noob ships all around the Keepstar in a huge circle. And then I started logging in Fags first and then Titans. And then once the Titans actually paused the timer again, I had everybody else log in their subs. That is still one of the most memorable uh, video clips or whatever that I like ever. Just everybody coming out of E-Warp, logging back in, just looks insane. I have it. It's great because Zarvox covered that thing on a stream back then when Zarvox still streamed. Let me link it. Where can I link it?
You can put it in chat, I believe, or give it to me and I'll put it in chat. That's interesting. So telling 2,700 people what to do has got to be a big rush, especially for a young man. Not many
So
opportunities
that
to do that.
timestamp I linked you there is basically when we started logging in. If you open the video, I don't know if you can.
I'll do that. Yeah. Yeah. Give me a second. I'll bring it up.
I recommend you mute comms. You don't want to have comms. You just want to.
Yeah, let's mute that now. Let that commercial play through. I'll go ahead and also put that here in chat. So somebody.
So at this timestamp I linked you, you see all the fags logging in, and they just come out of eWarp from all over the place. And then you have like all the Titans logging in from and coming back in from all over the place, and it just looks absolutely insane because they all come out of eWarp. They like converge in the middle where they were locked off. And then luckily he did a little cut there in the video, because then he skips right to where all the subcaps log in. It looks even, because the entire screen is just full
look
of
at that.
ship
Yeah.
icons.
Everything's going back to where it was, so it's moving
Yeah.
in slow mo.
There was obviously a bit of tie-dye already at that point, but you know, it's just ships coming out of warp. That's just all the Titans landing in fags. And then like a bit later after that, he like does a little cut in the video and you just see like all those subcaps log in. It's just insane. The entire screen is full of just ships coming out of E-Warp.
Yeah, there it is. Project Mayhem Keepstar vulnerable in Novella or Nalvula. Oh yeah, look at all those little ships. Oh, that's a good memory for you. And that was 2016, the fall.
Yeah.
This is
like I said, back then we could literally do whatever we wanted and nobody could do anything about it. So that felt really good. That was a good period of time. Obviously, it was very oppressive for everybody else playing Eve, because we could just deploy anywhere and be like, okay, well, we're just going to kill you now. And there was nothing that could really stop us.
Okay, we're just gonna kill you now. That was when you were joking about New World Order, right? Like that was.
Yeah, Elise made that up. Elise made up some New World Order meme, and then we started actually, I created a Discord that was called New World Order that had like a bunch of CEOs in it. I just randomly invited them, and we actually started scamming people for like Keepstar permits and shit. We told people if they pay the New World Order 50 billion they can anchor a Keepstar. Otherwise, we're gonna go blow it up. And I unironically had people pay me 50 bill. It's like, okay, can we anchor a Keepstar now? And some of them actually dropped one, and we went to one to actually defend it as well. And then
so you did do a little bit of.
yeah, we did a little bit of that. It wasn't a complete scam, obviously. We didn't defend all the keepstars that were dropped
Yeah.
and that paid the fee, because some of them we didn't need to farm for, right? Like we obviously had a very good internet network, so we knew which keepstars were contested or which not. But a lot of the drone keepstars, they all paid like 50 bill for the keepstar permit of the New World Order, and then nobody even bothered to farm for them. And so we were like, okay, well, it's just a free 50 bill, right?
Yep. So that was some of the stuff that you were looking at going down memory lane in World War B and post World War B. One of the things I also went down memory lane because I thought, this whole gambling thing is what is the big deal lately. And I
I
thought,
really
well,
don't know why it is a big deal. Though. Like, I don't understand why people are so upset about this. Is everybody like a social justice warrior now, where they're like, "Oh, gambling is bad for people. Why is it in this game? Who cares, man? If you like, I don't know. I just like it. That's why I changed my answer from no or yes when you asked, do you care about this or something?" I just said I don't care really, because the people that want to play on it, on that thing, the HyperNet relay, they can play, right, and the people that don't want to, they don't like have to. So I don't really see how it is a big deal at all. Is it really gambling addiction that we're worried about? Because I feel like that's not our place to be worried about. Like, who, unironically, who cares? I just don't think it's relevant at all.
uh,
How can gambling addiction be a relevant topic
well, we'll
in
discuss
Eve?
that in a second. What I want to show you here is something I have access to that most people don't. And this is the from 2014 to 2018. That is the stats of I Want ISK, the website, and how often it was used. And so one of the things I thought was really funny is during World War B, that would be right about here. That's when they were most popular, and a lot of the people that were actually
Where did
on.
you link this?
It's not linked. It's actually a photo that I took a long time ago.
Is it on a stream? Which
Oh,
which
I'm
channel
sorry.
are you
Yeah,
streaming to right now?
streaming to. We are on Talking in Stations, right? Or did
Oh
this?
yeah, there it is. I can
Yeah.
see it now. I can see it now.
Yeah, it came up a little bit later. So what you can see there is during World War B, they got massively popular. So as they're funding this war against the Imperium at the time, they were called the Imperium. A lot of Imperium members were actually playing I Want ISK, and so were other people. It was kind of funny. Even some SMA members, Space Monkeys Alliance members, were on I Want ISK because what the casino did is they gave out free vouchers. Like, we'll give you 100 million in credits, and you can spend those. And so once they spent the free 100 million that they had, then they would start going into their own funds, because you don't just stop after you start playing. You're gambling, so gambling on its own feels good. Why
Well,
is
but okay,
gambling is
okay.
problematic?
I can see the issue there already. Like the sentence, you don't stop after you play it. That's wrong. Like in my mind, I just stopped. I literally, and I was a member of I Want Isk, right? I was a banker.
Uh-huh.
I played once to understand how the slot machines work. I think I put in like one billion Isk or something. I gambled away those 1 billion Isk on a slot machine. I think I actually won more than I paid in, by the way. So I did actually have a positive feeling by making 8 bill out of those 1 bill or something. And I just never played on the website again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how that can be that much of an issue. Like,
well, the thing is, Killah, is
recession.
you have a strong mind, so you're not susceptible to the powers of
No, some of the
to the
strongest
Jedi mind
minds.
trick.
Some of the strongest minds are susceptible. It's not a weakness.
I'm just saying, like it requires you to have a particular kind of either a particular mindset, or like you need to be susceptible to to addictive things that are addictive. Like you need to have an addictive personality to sort of for it to latch in.
I guess people that play Eve. So I want to clarify. I'm not saying that gambling addiction isn't a serious illness or something. I fully understand that, but I don't understand how or why this is such a big deal when a gaming company releases something like the HyperNet relay. I don't feel like everybody needs to justify now, because nobody cares when a new casino opens somewhere, right? Like, or not a lot of people, anyways. The people that open a casino, the webs. There's so many online casinos now, right? It's even a section on Twitch where people play in casinos and live stream it on Twitch,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's happening, and it's actually hugely popular. The biggest German streamer, who, by the way, at the moment is the streamer with the most subscribers on Twitch, is a German. Funnily enough, most of his viewers he gets when he streams himself playing and gambling away thousands of euros in those slot machines. And I don't feel like the company should be like. It's very
No,
hard for me to
they
explain.
shouldn't be. They shouldn't be in any way liable to it, or they shouldn't be held to account in any particular way. Like the thing is, they're running an online casino, and it's dressed up as an online casino. It's not dressed up as anything else. Like they're very much like, this is a casino. This is gambling. You're playing games that are
Mm-hmm.
very
Which
very
is good though, right?
obviously
Like, that's
gambling.
better in my
That's
opinion.
completely fine. I am totally fine with that. It's when gambling, like mechanics and stuff like that, are presented as not not gambling.
Did CCP
Because it's
present it as if it is not gambling? Because that would be bad, right? Like I would agree that that is bad if they try to be like, well, we're doing this HyperNet relay. It's not actually gambling, but it really is, right? Because that would suck.
Well,
But I didn't.
no, they're not. No, they just haven't said anything about it. Again, we don't know much about CCP's point of view. They didn't talk about it in Eve London. They released it on CC, and they haven't really talked about it since, except to say some things along the lines of, look, if you think you're going to have a problem with this, write the company. The company will cut you off and not let you play it. That part of the game anyway. And other stuff. They will be monitoring people for people.
They do that, by the way, if you want to buy Plex as well, right? You can message CCP, be like, please cut me off from being able to spend real money on buying Plex or something, and they will do that. They will like not allow you to buy Plex with your account anymore.
Right, which is
obviously you can.
It's an ethical thing to do. I want to back up a second though. We'll get into the ethics in a minute, but again, I want to show what you're looking at here is iWantIsk's lifetime subscriber base, basically how many people were hitting it, and you can see it peaked during World War B, which is the area that I have section there. So basically, iWantIsk became most popular when, by the way, this big upturn right here is when Summerblink gets destroyed, right? That happened in 2000, middle of 2014, and so they inherit Summerblink's fan base basically, and they become very popular. That's what made them popular. It was when Summerblink went down, they were there at the right place at the right time. They also had a failed incident where what these casinos would do is they would promote themselves either through sponsoring other things like streamers or events. And one of the events that Nash Cadaver did, who was part of EVNT and -10 Gaming, the people who did the Alliance tournament and the latter parts of the Alliance tournament, these guys were very professional, is they had a Titan in a low-sec space, and that they invited a bunch of people to come and try to kill this Titan, and then Nash actually put together a defense fleet to make it more interesting, but the defense fleet ended up killing everybody that came to attack the Titan, so people thought it was a big trick. And iWantIsk had sponsored the event, and iWantIsk was very upset that people were being tricked, or it looked like people were being tricked, and so there was a big controversy, and that's when iWantIsk kind of got some publicity too. But they were never more popular, iWantIsk, than when they put money to go after the Imperium and to actually take them down in the north, which Killah was a big part of, and that's when they actually peaked. But then actually they went down after that. And what you can see not long after that, in the late 2016, more like late summer, CCP basically said, okay, no more games of chance. And you can see from that point on, it was they basically drifted off into obscurity until they finally closed in 2018. All this was built by one guy, Eep, and one server admin guy that later broke into Eep, which caused a lot of problems that started the World War B.
Well, the no more games of chance kind of thing was more, predicated because of the another issue that was going on in gaming, but not really connected to Eve. Like it was to do with gambling, sort of like gambling websites that basically allowed people to trade goods, like things from like Counter-Strike, Global Offensive, and that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah,
but like it was an ongoing thing that was spilling out into the general kind of public, and CCP kind of reacted on that with regards to iWantIsk to basically like score a hit with two birds with one stone sort of thing.
Well, and that's exactly what our best information is, that the in-game casinos actually weren't a big part of it, although a lot of people were complaining that this money couldn't be assailed. In other words, they were making money just filling time of boredom, which there's a plenty of in EVE Online, by giving people these games on outside websites to do while they waited. And the money was for the game was actually being used to transact all this stuff. And
well, all
that
the
allowed them to
because
accumulate money that could not be challenged in any way.
yeah,
That was a complaint.
because I want ISK like sort of they did make like a very small amount, but they made a small amount on every single every single sort of game that was being played. So it was accruing slowly over the more and more people played it more often during the day, kind of like um more clicks happening, and it just starts to pile up.
Right. So let me but so basically what you had is um something that was in a different game being challenged in law. That scared the heck out of CCP, I think, because they didn't want to have to deal with any of that stuff. And it was a good time to get rid of this other problem they had, which was unassailable wealth in the form of ISK tycoons that were built off these gambling games. When that happened, a lot of people were like, shoot, I really liked gambling, and now the Alliance tournament's less fun, et cetera, et cetera. And you've heard all this stuff over this last week as this was introduced. And so now CCP, much later, comes out with something that seems to thread every needle, right? Like they've changed things just a little bit, enough to thread the needle. And it's an international landscape, so you don't really know like what laws are going to apply. Now that CCP is in London, it's much more. They're much more susceptible to English law. At the same time, England is pulling out of the EU, so who knows? Like it's a big mess. But what CCP has built with this thing seems to thread all those needles legally, so it's not really a legal issue. If CCP gets into legal trouble, they can always say, "Okay, we'll take it out," and they can take it out. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, one of the reasons why I touched on the way that I want is kind of created or accrued their wealth. Some people kind of say that, gambling, they kind of say, oh, CCP banned gambling, but now, CCP's allowing gambling now because they're in control of the system. Well, yeah, the issue with the unassailable wealth that was happening with I Want ISK was down to the fact that they made money on every single game, every single time someone inputted money into any of the games that that was played on on I Want ISK. So that accrued money from huge amounts of people every single day, and every single minute of the day. But that doesn't really happen with the was it the HyperNet? Because the person that the people who actually get the small cut of every single one of these is CCP, and CCP is not going to funnel money into these taxes as such into player organizations for very political purposes. So it's a different beast.
Yeah. People have asked what's our position on this, talking stations. We don't really have a position on it. And if we did, it would seem to be similar to what the Imperium's position is, which is we don't like it. We don't necessarily endorse it. But if it's going to be in the game, we want to be good at it. Or at least that's what TIS wants to do. So we're thinking about how to get good at this. How do we leverage this into our shows? Do we do a whole gambling show? We'll call it a gambling show because heck, that's what it is.
Well,
Right? It's a
I
random.
I told you. I said
Yeah.
I said this to you yesterday, or was it on Saturday? I think in actual fact,
Mhm.
it makes giving away a Titan a lot easier. Let's put it that way.
Right. We gave away a
Yeah,
Titan to our fan base, and that turned out to be harder than it was. But this would make it really easy, right? Like,
yeah.
but I guess you would buy. I don't know how you would do it. You would give out the link saying you can participate in this, but they would have to put the ISK in, or how would you do it?
I mean, yeah, there would be a nominal kind of entry fee, obviously, but
Oh, I
it's
see.
not
But
going
you
to be
could
a
lower the
case of
price of the Titan to like, oh,
Yeah.
10 million, and therefore it would be like 1 million to get in, which is nominal for people
Yeah,
that watch the show.
exactly.
Yeah, I got you. So you just price it really low and then let people pretty much get in for free. And then you can get up to 512 people, which I think is more. We had about 500 people try to get that Titan. That went up. That actually went out to a fan that we're Liz Lizard Breath, I think, won that Titan.
Yep, and I would say that a whole bunch of other people. I doesn't. A whole bunch of other people tried to sort of work around the system in order to try and get their ults in to increase their chances, but it didn't work.
Yeah, it was funny. We were able to detect duplicates and all this other stuff. So we did some yeah, it was fun. But this would make it a lot easier to do something like that. I think that's what it would looks like for corporations too, when they want to give something away. A really good argument I heard was that and we talked about this earlier, when an alliance shifts away from a certain doctrine, they have a lot of leftover ships and fits and all that kind of stuff. So what do they do with them? Well, they can either take them out and go and whelp them and collect the insurance on them, or now they can actually just put those up for raffle inside the alliance and at a really low cost and disperse those ships among their players in a fair way, a very random way. There's some really good aspects to HyperNet Relay that are going to permeate different levels of EVE Online. The question is, are some people going to become HyperNet Relay tycoons? And if so, how can I be one of them? So I've been thinking about this, trying to figure out can you take advantage of HyperNet Relay and get good at it? And I think I have some ideas, but I won't share them today because we're almost out of time and I want to go to one other thing. But look for a future show where we talk about HyperNet Relay and how to do it right and how to get ahead with it and what situations it works well in and what situations it works poorly in. Because we have been doing some advanced thinking on how to make this work. And is Talking in Stations endorsing it, or we don't know yet. We'll talk about it as a team and decide how we want to deal with it. But there is a scenario that I can see where we just go full head into it, make as much money as we can with HyperNet Relay, or give as much value to fans as we can. Use it as a tool to reward people who've been with us a long time and have been helpful. And then also use whatever ISK we can get to either help fund some of the TIS people that do the work, or divert it to the Fleet Academy, which is starting up early next year as well. There's a lot of different scenarios that can play out here, and it's not decided, but we'll actually talk with the guys that make Talking in Stations happen, like McLeod. Okay, so I'm tabling the rest of HyperNet Relay. I'm going to save the last few minutes for Dazzling Spot, who just joining us. How are you doing, Dazzling?
You're not going to enjoy my crappy microphone, I think. You might want to save it another 15 minutes because I'm in traffic.
No, actually, you sound all right. If you don't mind talking while you're driving, I don't mind doing that either when I do it.
I'm not going anywhere.
It's traffic.
It's a bit standstill. Yeah.
Is this our eye in the sky traffic report section?
Although I might disappear for a few minutes as dead spots and things like that.
Oh, that might not work. But what's on your mind? Because you and I have been talking a lot. I think it's interesting what you're uncovering. Why don't you tell us about that?
A quick unrelated note: did nobody mention that giveaways aren't possible because anyone can just buy all the tickets?
Oh, that's good, but a person would be able to see who buys those tickets. So if it was your corporation that you're giving it to, you could discipline them.
Apparently, Dazzling, according to Steve Renukin at least, there's conversations going on in the background as to a potential one ticket only option.
Oh,
so people
okay.
are restricted to only buying one ticket, maybe. But that's to be seen. That's TBC right now.
Oh, okay. I was going to bring up your character portrait, but that's not your name. Your Discord name isn't your in-game name, it looks like.
What's that? Myself?
Your Discord name is not the same as... I was going to bring up a portrait of you, so I had something to look at.
Well, I don't really enjoy getting all kinds of threats in game because of
Okay,
because of the
good.
things that I talk about.
So dazzling is
Fortnite makes do for now.
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense because the stuff that you're talking about is sensitive. Now, for some of you that are not familiar, dazzling is somebody that I was talking to and essentially had said, "Hey, there's a group of I don't know, what would you call them, dazzling?"
It's a bit of an awkward one. I would say white supremacist is the closest you're going to get to a valid definition.
Yeah. So we're back on white supremacy, and how do we avoid
Hooray!
it? Yeah. How do we avoid it? How do we stay out, keep that from infecting our social situation here?
I want to know whether they're all running Purity of the Maskins or not.
It's a good point. The whole thing about avoiding it is just being aware. And one thing I've noticed is people are really, really afraid to point it out when they see it,
Yeah.
or they're just very quick to just say, I don't want to talk about politics. But I'm sorry, but it's life, unfortunately, and there are terrible people out there, and they're in your game, and deal with it.
Yeah. We talked about this yesterday too, as I brought it up with none other than Andrew Groen, who writes about EVE history and treats it with a lot of reverence and understands the depth and the intricacy of EVE Online and how it relates to actual social situations. And he took it very seriously. And, and he's like, yeah, that stuff is in EVE Online. And EVE Online is a social media. This is like a Facebook. This is like a Twitter. You may not think it is, but it is. It rewards the same sensors in your brain. It gives you the same companionship. It builds on associations, and ideas get transferred. And so you do have to say, well, we have some limits on that, right? We clearly have some limits. There's a lot of stuff that in any country, you're not going to be able to talk about child endangerment or anything that has to do with young people in a way that's adverse to their growing up holistic, right? So we defend children, and that's a line that we draw. I think in our
even in EVE, there's a clause in the agreement that you may not create or be a part of groups that I can't remember the exact description, but something along the lines of you may not join hate groups, race hate groups, that sort of stuff. And the group we're talking about absolutely qualifies as one of those.
What do they do?
A lot of the time they tend to try, like, these groups like try and sidestep those particular aspects of the the EULA in terms of service by obfuscating what they actually are.
Yeah, that's the whole argument essentially at the moment, is that it is obfuscated. It's not, unless you know what you're looking for, and I'm sure people will get their pitchforks when I say that, saying that I'm intentionally looking for it, so I'm finding it, of course. But if you're aware of the kind of tropes that are used by these kind of groups, you can spot it. But to the average Joe, it just looks like, oh, it's a weird Norse Viking thing, and I'm just going to skim read the description. But when you read the description properly, you notice all of the more sinister messages.
Well, it's pretty obvious from the stuff that I've seen that it's, in this case, it's white supremacist, right? So it's easy to see because there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet, and this basically sounds a lot like it. It's fine to be proud of your race. I totally endorse that for whatever race you are. It's a different thing to say that you're a race above all others, and then you start to go down the path of eliminating and making your race pure, and that just starts to get very, very dangerous.
It's a very dodgy place to go down.
So the sort of developing breaking news, I suppose, that I'm not going to name too many names just because it's still I've still got a lot of things to dig out about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, a junior FC of a MPSI group was called out. No, we're not talking about Nova, just to make that clear.
Okay.
A junior FC, a MPSI group, was called out for promoting this attitude group, the white supremacy. And the defense given at the time was something along the lines of, I might fly with them sometimes, but I don't follow their beliefs. And it was also claimed that he didn't speak English enough to he didn't speak English well enough to understand the question. The problem is, we recently found a character sale post posted by this FC in question, and the character he's selling is the CEO of the Asatru Alliance, the one where the CEO that had the most abhorrent stuff in his bio, the original source for all of the white supremacy, like the more obvious stuff that was literally using the words ethnicity and race. So it kind of throws into question any of the thoughts of, well, he absolutely knew what he was doing because he is the CEO. He is the founder. He wrote much of the material.
Oh, wow. Well, that's an explosive charge. Won't say who it is yet because we want to make sure all that is nailed down, right?
So there's two possibilities. Either he is the person, he did it all, or he sold the character on behalf of somebody else, which is a bannable offense. So it's his choice to either come out and say, I'm a Nazi, or he can say, I wrote the EULA and I should be banned.
Yeah. What's the name of the corporation or alliance?
The alliance in question is Asatru Alliance. The CEO was a character called Frigerson, who founded a corporation called English Asatru Folk, which was eventually closed and reformed by somebody called Freya into the Asatru Alliance itself. And I'm about to go in a bit of a dead zone, so I might cut out.
Asatru Alliance. Asatru Alliance here.
Yeah, that's one of these.
There it is.
Asatru is one of the sort of names, and that they tend to use as obfuscation. I think.
Asatru, yeah. That's too bad. This is just really sad. When we get Spod back. But what's interesting here is it's first of all, this is a group that really should be discouraged from operating in EVE Online if they're going to slowly indoctrinate or try to indoctrinate people into to basically hate behavior. So that needs to be discovered. That needs to come to light. It has been reported to CCP, and CCP is going to have an image problem if they don't do something about this or take it seriously. And because this is the kind of thing that is pernicious inside of social medias, right? It's all over the place, and it's being normalized, and that needs to stop by people that can say something, should say something.
Yeah, that is true. We can segue into something, Eve, that's actually kind of pretty cool.
What's that?
With CCP wanting to change some of the Citadel mechanics.
What
the late December patch.
What the
I know
hell?
you're probably there going. You're probably there going like, "Hell, I'd like to see how he's going to thread this needle."
I'm going to do it for the entertainment value, but we'll end after that. And Dazzling, we'll come back to this. We're not through with Asatru. We'll talk about them until we can really crack this open. And if we have to write an article about it, putting all the links together, we will.
Can I just point one last thing out?
Sure.
So the guy in question, the CEO, is either today or this week attempting to do a charity stream in attempts to whitewash his reputation.
Right. Interesting.
That kind of that's just scummy.
Yeah. Well, that's that. Right. Look, we did. It was brought to my attention when I was the head of INN, the editorial board there, that there was a scam going on, and it was Olivia. Now, I had seen the Olivia scam before, and I warned people not to endorse it too heavily because it was such touchy material. I said, this is not it's not really good for Eve Media to pick up this story and propagate it, because it seems it was a suicide story, right? This girl was so distraught that she was going to commit suicide because people were mean to her in Eve. And I just thought, we can't possibly help that. So let's not deal with it. And let's actually refer it to professionals. And it's the people that didn't listen to me were other podcasts or whatever, and they ran with it. Then 2 months later, somebody says something's not adding up, and they turn that information over to Riva, and Riva turns it over to me, and we open an investigation and start looking into this I Am Olivia, as it was called. Like, we're all this girl who's the victim. And so when we looked into it, it was really disgusting form of scam, where people were basically, this guy was posing as a woman, and he'd made up this entire family of characters, and they were just appealing to all the buttons that Eve players really want to relate to, which is defending of the poor girl, white knighting, and just a lot of that kind of stuff. So it really had a lot of traction. It turned out all to be false, and it was a guy spearfishing for money. And we uncovered him, and it wasn't the first time he'd done it, and we didn't go into the real life part of it, but we definitely blew that out of the water. And everybody said, thanks, INN, thanks for doing that. That was a service to the community, because the guy was getting a lot of traction. He was starting to get a lot of sympathy and real money and tricking people and all this other stuff. So EVE Online can be weaponized, as you know, against real people. And there are situations where you have to call some stuff out when it's appropriate to do it. I think this is another time when it's appropriate to say, there's a white supremacist group or white supremacist guy or whatever, but somebody who's putting through that stuff through EVE Online. And again, EVE Online is a social media, and we're a part of that social media, and we want to basically defend the community from that kind of pernicious behavior. And I think this is another opportunity to do that. That's why I'm looking at it with Dazzling, who brought it to my attention. And I've looked into it, and a lot of stuff that I've seen, although I can't go into it, seems very reliable and concrete. So I think there's definitely a lot to look at here. Okay.
Let's just say the sources list on your article is going to be very long.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, we can't let this we'll do what we can to bring light to it, and then it's up to CCP to do what's appropriate for their ethics. And right now, I think they're gonna CCP has to look at this carefully, because they're starting to develop an image problem among people who don't want to be associated with gambling, don't want to be associated with white supremacy and that kind of stuff. This is toxic stuff, and they've dealt with this before effectively. So maybe they'll continue to deal with it.
There has been some response from CCP so far, in that they removed the links in several profiles that linked to the particularly nasty websites that were, well, they were the websites were all about white supremacy and stuff like that. They've removed those, and they said they're looking into it further. What happens next is a mystery.
Well, we shall find out.
It's on their radar, so that's it's a good thing.
Yeah, but I hope they don't take a half measure and say we just did what we knew was and stuff. But yeah,
I think the concern is that CCP either aren't aware of or haven't spent the time in looking into how deep this hole goes. And I know it sounds like a mad conspiracy, but it just sadly very much isn't.
Yeah. Again, nobody who's ascribing to white supremacy is going to come into a social situation just say like, hey, look, everybody, this is what I believe. What happens, it's a very slow process of figuring out who's susceptible to your message, who laughs at the racist jokes that you actually put out. You get a feel for who you can talk to about the thing that you really believe in. It's almost the same as talking about EVE Online, which is kind of scary, right? You're like, you go to a party and you're like, yeah, I play video games. And somebody says like, oh, I like video games. And then you're thinking like, well, maybe I can talk to this guy about EVE Online. Do you like sci-fi video games? Yeah, I like sci-fi. I like The Expanse. That's a great series. And there's this game, EVE
Looking
Online.
good. Yeah.
You don't come into a party saying like, "Hey, everybody, I play EVE Online." You actually feel people
Some
out.
people do.
Well, some people do. Yeah, some people do. But when you're not sure how it will be accepted, you kind of negotiate that at first, figuring out like, is this person susceptible to talking about EVE Online? And that's how humans work. And that's how they work with good messages like EVE Online and bad messages like white supremacy.
Yep.
Okay, thread that needle and then let's get out for the day. We've been here a long time.
So, one of the things that I found out about Eve, which I thought was actually really, really inspirational, and this kind of goes back to the old solve mechanics of Dominion and also of the old sort of pos mechanics, which is basically sort of around the idea of time zone tanking and the ability for you to be able to kite poses out of your time zone and into other time zones. Essentially, what it meant was it kind of almost forced player groups to kind of spread and kind of get in touch and communicate and talk to people from outside of their their outside of their geographical location, right? And the nice thing about that is it breaks down misheld beliefs, like sort of basically sort of beliefs of other cultures and that kind of thing. Essentially, it breaks down barriers and sort of assumptions, like bad assumptions. That maybe one sort of ethnic group or sort of nationalistic kind of group has with another group kind of thing. The nice thing about one of the things that CCP is doing in the winter, specifically with the Kicking Castles update that's coming up, like right at the, I think at the end of the year, is they're removing the day selection on the on your basically reinforcement selection, and what that kind of means is that you'll have less of a capacity to hardcore time zone tank your citadels and stuff like that, which means that you'll come back to you'll start to sort of come back to the previous way of maybe actually talking to groups that are outside of your geographical location to provide additional security and additional kind of defense for your stuff, which to me is really good because it breaks down the kind of the xenophobic nature of what I consider to be like hardcore time zone tanking. So there you go. That was my threading.
So you'll talk to people in different parts of the world because you need their time zone help.
Yeah, because it's beneficial to you.
Right. I like that. Very interesting. Okay, that does it for today, December 2nd. It is Cyber Monday. Look out for specials. If you're wondering, Adobe, this is not a plug for them or anything, but Adobe has a 30% off sale for the year, which is pretty good. And if you're in education, it's 70% off. So if you ever wanted to have a year-long license, look into that. And there's a bunch of other stuff. So check out what Cyber Monday sales look like. The sales started on Friday. And
there's Reddit. There's basically there's like Reddit subreddits and stuff like that look for good deals and stuff like that. So if you're looking for good PC deals and stuff like that, there are subreddits that are really really going full on with all of these.
I am on the verge of hitting yes to Stellaris, which is $10 right now off Steam. I just can't do it because
it's 100% worth.
It's what?
It's 100% worth it.
100% worth it. I just feel like that might take me away from EVE Online, so I'm resistant. Yeah, exactly. Like I'll start playing and be like, EVE, what? I know it's a great game. And the thing is, I was watching one of their trailers. And I was like, oh, EVE, please do this. It's like a wondrous universe, seeing, actual giant space whales. And You know, there's no nature in Eve. One of the most beautiful moments I had in Eve Online was looking at a storm planet, seeing the lightning strike. Like, it doesn't feel organic. It feels very, very much spaceships against spaceships and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, but that's $10, which is kind of a good price. And one of the things I might do, because I like virtual worlds and role play immersion, is on Sony PS4. There's I think it's half price for what's it called? Red Redemption, Dead Red Redemption or something. Part 2, and that was something that was a really good game that came out last year. So it's like $30 now instead of $60. Okay, well, check all that out. I hope it's still relevant when you hear this. We're going to publish this as quickly as possible on the Today in Eve Online podcast, which is different than Talking in Stations podcast. So these all go out on podcast through SoundCloud, and you can find it on by name, Today in Eve Online on iTunes. Yep, both great games, take up lots of hours, and one thing I don't have is time. And today we're out of time because we've been going for 90 minutes. Thanks, everybody, for coming and listening in on this morning's news. It was a bit longer because we were off for a few days. We'll try to get these going daily. It's not easy. And I want to say we have lost, I didn't look at this for a while, Patreons. Some Patreons basically ran out of gas because they've been supporting us for so long. They've done their part. And so they've lost, some of them lost interest in EVE Online, so it's not fair to ask them to pay for all this kind of stuff that we do. So I'm asking you, if you're listening to this, and I should ask on Talking in Stations as well, and you like the podcast versions of things, then go to Patreon/Matterall and chip in and keep us motivated and keep us going, because when we look at doing all this work and even doing more work and trying to get more involved, and then we see our financial support going down, it's just demoralizing, frankly. Okay, there it is.
Well,
go ahead, McLeod. You disagree?
I kind of disagree, but it's only based on the time of the year, really. If anything, like a lot of people kind of, a lot of people kind of look at their finances and stuff when it comes to up to Christmas and stuff, and look to see what they can reasonably afford to cut back on. Only really until the end of the Christmas period is done, and then generally you tend to sort of see renewed kind of vigor for people sort of supporting things like podcasts and stuff like that in the new year. So like I'd say, Madral, like it's not it shouldn't, don't consider it to be like a clear and obvious trend that's going to carry on after Christmas, but just people tend to look at Christmas as a
we've
time
been
to
losing support since April. But we peaked in April. I don't even know what was going on there. This is before blackout, before all that stuff. People that left, people who stopped sponsoring us because of what they call censorship was a total of $6. That was like 2 people. And one person left was $5 because a month, by the way, because I ran for CSM and they thought that was, so there are some things that I've done to deserve people leaving, and it's fine. Keep your money, because we were not censoring. We were basically saying, stop being gloomy about CCP. Stop concern trolling their finances and how they're dying and all this other stuff. And we would say that again and again and again. That was not something I'll apologize for at all. And we'll even refund money if people disagreed with that. But we do want the people who do like us and do support the environment, they like the Discord, they like the stuff that they're listening to get involved and put in a little bit. Maybe not during Christmas, you're right. Maybe the wrong time, but we'll check it out at the beginning of next year. Because I'm telling you, without progress, it's hard to get up every morning and do this.
It is true. But the only other thing that I'd want to add to that is, if you were a Patreon supporter and you've kind of stopped, and it's not sort of like a seasonal thing or it's like an ideological thing maybe, or a thing that's maybe you've left the game, so you don't really see the necessity to sort of to support something that you're not interested in anymore. But like if it's not a temporary thing, but you're still playing Eve, you're still interested in Eve and stuff like that, and you've kind of you've considered, or basically you've stopped with the Patreon kind of thing. Like if it's something that we've done or that we've failed to do, that get in touch with us and let us know sort of kind of why and whether we can rectify that, because it may be something that we could double down on and improve the situation.
Yeah, so we were closing in on $600 a month, and now we're down to $248. Again, it's people who have done a lot, and we thank them for their support they did for a couple years, 3 years. But we never really push this. Like, we should actually do a telethon kind of thing on this sort of thing if we wanted to. If this was maybe the main thing that we wanted to do, we would, every once in a while just really bang on you guys to support this. But instead, we don't even mention it. A lot of people don't even know we have it. So of course we're going to lose people after years because they've been doing it for so long. So anyway, thanks very much for listening.
Just as I got back.
Oh, sorry, Killah. We're on our way out. But listen, if you want to talk to these guys and listen to their stories and stuff, you can always do it. Talking in Stations Public Voice 1. Come hang out with us and listen in or tell us about your story. We're interested in everybody. Okay, thanks very much, Killah, for a great walk down memory lane. And McLeod, thanks for hanging out with me. That's it for today. We will see you tomorrow on Today in EVE Online.